Open your mind.
Good evening and welcome to Open Your Mind Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And you have myself, Stephen George. A very good evening.
Good evening. It's Sunday the 2nd of March 2014. And one of the things we're going to quickly talk about is chemtrails in a few minutes, because there seems to be a lack of chemtrails for the last few days, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. But before we crack on, we'll find out what the communication channels are.
Okay, communication channels, please, Mary.
The communication channels are female, info@oymireland.com, by phone 046 927 1212, and you can also contact us direct through the OYM chat room.
Thanks very much, Mary. 046927 1212 if you want to ring in at any stage and ask questions to our special guest this evening. If you're ringing in from outside the Republic of Ireland, it's 00353 46927 1212. We're going to be monitoring our own chat room as well, and the PIR, People's Internet Radio chat room. And if you want to pop along to our chat room, it's always fun and frolics going on in there. Just navigate to oymradio.com, and on the left-hand side you will see the chat button. Just click it and enjoy. Alan.
Right, okay, and don't forget that we have a Facebook page and a YouTube page as well. So pop along to Facebook and click on like and become our friend and have a look at all the information we have there on Facebook and on the pods on YouTube. You can catch up with the pods on there. Now, our guest we're going to bring in a few minutes is Dr. Terry Wahls, and she cured herself of multiple sclerosis. Now, for some people out there, when they hear that awful diagnosis by the doctors, they probably think, that's it, I'm finished, there's nothing I can do, I might as well just go with it, take the drugs and see what happens. But to have somebody on who's a doctor and who has cured herself of multiple sclerosis kind of shows a bit of kind of light at the end of the tunnel, that you can change it, you can make a difference. So we're going to be getting Terry on in a few minutes to talk about that and talk about her journey and what happened and what she did to cure herself of MS. But before we do that, we are just going to mention a few things. We do have a few things to talk about, but instead of going through all that and leaving our guest waiting for a few minutes, what we're going to do is we're going to do all the talking at the end of the show. So just in case you think that at the end of the show, you know, we're not going to be talking about much, we have a few things to talk about, quite important things. So keep tuned in after that, after the actual interview. But you're going to tell us about the T-shirts, Steve?
Yes, I'm just going to mention about the old T-shirts. The T-shirts arrived, as you probably know, and they're up on the website, available for anyone who would like an OYM T-shirt. All the cool people are wearing these T-shirts. You're not cool unless you're wearing one of these OYM T-shirts. And a big shout out to Chris. Chris is dancing around in his OYM T-shirt this evening. And I just want to mention about the Miami Vice suit. He's wearing his Miami Vice suit over the OYM T-shirt, and he's looking good. I don't know if he's wearing the shades as well, but yeah. Anyone else who wants to look as cool as Chris, just pop along into the shop on the OYM website and snag yourself a T-shirt before they're all gone.
And apparently, they're actually better than the Linux advert. They're brilliant for attracting the opposite sex. Brilliant, apparently. That's the feedback. Just coming through my headphones now, the feedback is...
It's just coming in over the wire, is it?
It's coming in over the wire. The people who have purchased the T-shirt, the opposite sex has a massive attraction to them.
That's right. I think Chris mentioned to me that he is currently going through the motions of being a babe magnet. So, yeah, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And because they just want to find out, what does open your mind? Why do you want me to open your mind? So, there you go. So don't... we only have a certain limited... amount of T-shirts there, so, you know, be quick. Okay, the other thing that we're just going to mention before we bring Terry in, Dr. Terry in, is the chemtrails. Now, I don't know whether some of you have noticed, and myself and Steve have, and we've asked one or two people outside of Ireland as well, have you seen any chemtrails? And they said, no, the last few days it's been quite quiet. They haven't seen them. So, for everybody on the chat room, in PIR and the OYM chat room, can you let us know if you have seen any chemtrails where you are in your location, wherever you may be? Put down your country or county and just tell us, you know, in the last few days, have you seen it? And we'll have a bit of a discussion at the end of the show. We'll be talking about it. Just let us know. Let Steve know. Steve will pick it up on the chat show. on the chat facility, and we'll have a chat about it because yeah. So somebody said to me, basically we had a phone call from Patrick. Patrick is a regular listener to the show, and he was talking to a chap called David Hugo Boyle, who's been on controversial TV. And according to David, anyway, he said that's part of the good guys doing what they're doing and stopping the chemtrailing. So we don't know. We are going to get David on, thanks to Patrick. We're going to get David on the show sometime in the next few weeks and talk to him about it. But let us know if you have seen no chemtrails over the last few days, or you have seen them. Just let us know in the chat, and we'll have a talk about it after the interview. Right. Without further ado, we're going to get our guest on now. As I say, our guest is Dr. Terry Wahls. She cured herself of multiple sclerosis, which is a devastating, I don't know whether you call it disease, debilitating disease.
It would be, yeah. Well,
like
I mean,
disease,
the chap that I know who was diagnosed, I say, he may as well have been told he got cancer.
Yeah.
You know, he was.
Well, that's it.
His life was turned upside down, inside out.
That's the shock. You know, when you hear that, you know, you might as well be told you get cancer. But we're going to find out from Terry exactly all about it. So, good evening, Terry. How are you?
Excellent, and thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks for coming on. Much appreciated. I mean, to find out, I think we're pretty much right in what we say. I mean, if you just want to confirm that, I don't know. When people hear them 2 words from the doctor, I mean, it's as bad as cancer hearing that.
Well, it's pretty upsetting. When I was diagnosed in 2000, being a doc, started reading the medical literature, and what I saw was that within 10 years of diagnosis, half of all people are no longer able to work because of severe fatigue disability, and then 1/3 will have a problem with gait and walking. Yes, that was certainly very distressing news to me.
So, you being a doctor, tell us about your background and what you're a doctor and what area you covered, and then how it all kind of transpired.
So, I'm an internal medicine physician. And I'm at an academic center, so I'm at a university here in the U.S., the University of Iowa. And in 2000, I started having some problems stumbling and falling. Had a extensive workup with a lot of blood tests, an MRI of my spinal cord and of my brain, a spinal tap. And then they reviewed my medical record, and saw that in 13 years earlier, I'd had problems with some visual dimming, and then now had the problem with my left leg. I had lesions on the spinal cord at the level of the neck, and I had abnormal spinal fluid with oligobands. So on the basis of 2 lesions separated by time, at 13 years, in space, vision and leg, plus the lesions on the spinal cord and the abnormal spinal fluid, a diagnosis of relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis was made. I was told to begin disease-modifying drug therapy. I decided to get a second opinion at one of the internationally recognized MS centers. That was the Cleveland Clinic. They reviewed my records, examined me, and said, yes, you have relapsing remitting MS, and also recommended a disease-modifying drug. So I started that, and for the next 3 years, I had just one episode of worsening. It's called a relapse. So that would be considered a success if it was in a clinical trial. But the problem was I was getting steadily weaker. It was more difficult to walk. I was having more problems with fatigue. And my physicians told me that my disease had transitioned to secondary progressive MS, and recommended a scooter, and then said, no, let's do a tilt-recline wheelchair because of the fatigue. They also recommended I take novantrone, a form of chemotherapy, which I did. And then when it became available, I took Tysabri. When that was pulled from the market, I took Cellcept, which is another immune-suppressing drug. But, when I hit the wheelchair was when I decided, conventional medicine was failing me. I was declining, and I thought I was headed towards becoming ultimately bedridden by my illness. I couldn't be any more upset, so I might as well go ahead and start reading the medical literature again. So I started studying, and through that, I found papers for Parkinson's, Huntington's, Alzheimer's, and that mitochondria were the big player in why the brains were shrinking for these diseases. Then I found studies in which the mouse brains had been protected using various varieties, vitamins and supplements. I started those that seemed to slow down the speed of my decline. I was still declining, but I was very grateful to have slowed things down. By the summer of 2007, I could walk short distances using 2 canes. I could sit up for about 10 minutes. Otherwise, I had to be in a recliner or in bed because my back muscles were so weak. And that's when I discovered the Institute of Functional Medicine. I took their course, Neuroprotection, a Functional Medicine Approach for Common and Uncommon Neurological Syndromes, which really deepened my understanding of things that I could do to protect my brain. And I had a much longer list of vitamins and supplements, which I added. And I'm going to back up for just a moment. Back in 2002, I had discovered the paleo movement, and after 20 years of being a vegetarian, I slowly reintroduced meat, eliminated grains, dairy, and legumes from my diet. But I continued to decline. So in 2007, I discovered functional medicine. I had more vitamins and supplements. Then at the fall of 2007, I had what I think is a really brilliant insight that I should get this long list of nutrients from the food that I'm eating, as opposed to the synthetic versions of these vitamins and supplements in capsule form. So I have to do more research to figure out where they are in the food supply, and that takes us more time. But once I do that, I've reorganized my diet, still using paleo principles, but stressing the foodstuffs that would give me those 19 key nutrients. And that's when the magic begins. 3 months after that, I'm walking throughout the hospital without a cane. 6 months after that, I'm on my bike for the first time, probably in 5 or 6 years. A year after all of that, I'm able to do an 18-mile bike ride with my family. And of course, this really changes how I view disease and health. It ultimately changes how I practice medicine. It causes me to change the clinical research that I do, so that now I have a clinical practice that's really focused on a functional medicine approach, and I have a clinical trials that are testing these interventions and others with progressive MS and things like fibromyalgia, traumatic brain injury. And I'm teaching the public and the medical community about the critical role of diet and lifestyle in creating health. That the conventional approach, which I had used most of my professional career, treats symptoms, it treats disease, but doesn't create health.
Exactly.
Instead, we work on creating health. We have a much more dramatic impact for our patients, whatever their underlying disease states.
But you know as well as I do, Dr. Terry, that the doctors out there, they just treat the symptom and not the cause. And it's not in their interest to heal people. Now, I know you could argue the point whether this is out of ignorance or just the way they're being controlled, because we know the pharmaceutical companies invest in the actual training in the colleges, and they don't actually focus. And this is from other doctors that we've had on the show, and they don't actually focus on natural healing. Because, you know, the trouble is, obviously, healthy people don't make money for the pharmaceutical industry. And if you try and go to a medical doctor, which I've done, and I'm sure Steve has done, and other people have done, and you try and wake them up to these poisons that are in our food, they just say, oh, well, I'm a doctor, I know more than you do. And this kind of approach to people. And this idea that, well, we're just going to give you drugs all the time, instead of looking at any natural ways to do it. I mean, surely that must have been an eye-opener for you, to go from being a standard, you know, run-of-the-mill doctor, if you don't mind me saying that, practicing and giving out standard drugs, and then all of a sudden you come across, you have a problem, and because of that, has opened your mind to alternatives.
Oh, yeah. You know, and actually, I tell people that getting multiple sclerosis and having progressive MS, spending 4 years in a tilt recline wheelchair, is really one of the most profound gifts I've ever received, because it motivated me to go back and relearn my basic science, and it allowed me to see the world of disease and health through very different eyes, both as a person and then intellectually, now that I get the science behind all of this. So it really has been quite profound, and I'm very, very grateful.
And what have your colleagues, who are obviously other doctors, what have they said? Are they amazed? Have they changed their way of thinking, or have they just said, oh, it's just pure luck? I mean, what's their approach?
Okay, so this has been going on for quite a while. In the university, saw me become severely disabled, get into the wheelchair, getting more and more frail, and then saw this stunning recovery. I did a grand rounds for my department, presenting my case and my theories as to what were the mechanisms. And of course, that grand rounds was controversial. Some people thought it was brilliant, and others thought it was just too weird. And people criticized me, said, one case, so what? We really need research, and I completely agreed. So we wrote the grants, got funding, and got the clinical trial going. Now my department and the College of Medicine both have research days where we can go put up our research posters and present our data on our current studies. So we've been doing that since 2010, twice a year. And my colleagues come look at what we're doing and see that we've got the research. We're showing that people could implement the regimen, that it's safe. And then they're seeing this very exciting data. And now more recently, we're showing the videos of the changes in the walking abilities that we're seeing. And so people are coming around because we're doing the science. We're taking the time to show that this does have a role to play. And interestingly enough, I have more and more people who are asking to join my study team because they know I'm freezing blood, so we can do some more analyses to understand why I'm having this profound effect.
Right. And have you had anybody knock on your door and say to you, Terry, we don't really want you doing this?
Oh, yeah. Particularly early on, when I started focusing more on nutrition, using vitamins and supplements in my practice, and that was back in 2008. That was really very startling at first for people to have a conventional physician so focused on diet and environmental factors. So the chief of staff called me in and said, look, I've got people complaining, and so I brought down 85 articles and had long conversations with my chief of staff about the scientific rationale for what I was doing and why. And so my chief of staff came around on my side, and he defended me. And when people complained, then he said, look, she's not harmed anyone, and she's got great science behind her. And he helped, was very supportive in getting my clinical trial going. So I have to give a tremendous thank you to Dr. John Cowdery, who was a very big help in the beginning.
Okay, and do you feel that with what you're doing and obviously other doctors seeing the science and seeing the results being positive, that they're beginning to slowly come around and at least inquire about it and ask the questions?
Yes, I would tell you that I'm seeing both the medical community, the physicians are much more interested in functional medicine, much more interested in diet and lifestyle as a possibility. So there's a lot more excitement in the medical community, less skepticism. And in my patients that I'm seeing, they are, I would say, every year I see them being more interested in non-drug options, much more open to the impact of diet and lifestyle. So I feel very encouraged.
Well, see, that's where you're probably going to come across a brick wall sooner or later, or you might or might not do. But in our experience and the guests that we've had on and doctors we've had on, they always say, and I don't know how true this is, but the saying is that, say, for every cancer patient, they're worth €50,000 to the pharmaceutical industry. So, that's good business. And why would you want to, promote an alternative way, especially when it's got to do with, natural foods, and lose that profit margin from the pharmaceutical industries? And this is why, we've known that cancer has been treated successfully since the 1930s. And off the top of the head, say, we could name probably 6 different methods people have used to cure cancer. Now, I don't know about MS, but obviously maybe the principles are the same regarding food and nutrition and diet.
Let me talk a little bit about MS. The disease-modifying agents, at least here in the U.S., you have your first round of disease-modifying drugs, Avonex, Betaseron, Copaxone, and then Rebif. And when I first started them, they were about $900 a month.
Wow.
Then the next big player that came on was Tysabri, and I believe that was at $40,000 a year. And that must have been around 2005, if I'm recalling correctly. And now there's Gilenya and another new drug whose name is escaping me, and they're priced at $50,000 to $60,000 a year. And all of these very potent immune-suppressing drugs that are used for the autoimmune conditions such as Enbrel, Humira, are priced in that range. So they are a multi-billion-dollar industry. And, of course, that industry it will not want to go away.
No.
And there are many people, being employed, et cetera. So there's a lot of forces to keep that going. And the pharmaceutical companies often develop relationships then with the societies such as the Multiple Sclerosis Society or the various patient advocacy groups for autoimmune conditions. And creates this incentive to get people diagnosed early on these very potent disease-modifying drugs. And really nobody's encouraging the physicians to talk about the diet and lifestyle factors that are critical to these diseases. Because the research will tell you that there's this very small genetic component, that there may be 100 genes that will very slightly increase your risk, perhaps 0.5% or 1%, if you have them to develop an autoimmune condition. What really drives this is the environmental factors, and that's the diet and lifestyle choices that will turn on your health problems into whatever chronic disease issue you've got, be it cancer, an autoimmune problem, heart disease, diabetes, mental health problems. So if the physicians instead would focus, use the drugs to stabilize the patient, but really focus on diet and lifestyle, you could get to the root as to why that disease developed. Yeah. And then untangle the mess and let the person get health again.
But they don't want that because they would lose the money. Because if they, I always say this, from a relative who is on I have a relative who suffers from epilepsy. And obviously she's been diagnosed for years and she has a daily ritual with tablets. And to me, that's like, in the computer industry, it's like perpetual software licensing. The drug companies don't want people to take a drug and get well, and then that's it. If they can get people on perpetual drugs on a daily or monthly or weekly basis, and that money's coming into them on a regular basis, they're happy with that.
And I could add another layer of concern. The younger you get people on a chronic drug, then that's more valuable to the pharmaceutical industry. So you see drugs being pushed into kids for more and more disease states.
That's right. There's a massive. It seems to be in the States, not over here or in Europe, but over in the States. it seems to be that if you look in the wrong direction, they prescribe Ritalin for kids and are saying that you have ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I certainly agree, and I have grave concerns for the amount of drugs that are being introduced into kids. But I will acknowledge I'm not a pediatrician, so I'm expressing that concern as a mom, and I think it's very worrisome.
It definitely is. One of the things Dr. Lorraine Day said to us when she was on the show, she said, now I know this is very cynical, but I mean maybe she has a point. She said if you take the prescription pad away from a doctor, he's lost. And because he said doctors are normally good at either, giving drugs or taking body parts off you, but they don't look at the natural dietary ways that can maybe resolve the issues that you're having.
So if you look at how physicians are trained, there's a study on how many hours of nutrition education are the medical students getting. It's less than 20 hours in their 4 years. So they have a huge amount of training on drugs, procedure, very minimal nutrition. No one's really looked at how much they get on toxins or stress reduction, exercise, lifestyle interventions. It's very unfortunate for the physicians because they need those things to get through medical school and residency themselves. And we have many, many studies that indicate if you are not a practitioner of diet and lifestyle changes, when you're a doc, you won't be teaching that to your patients.
That's right. We did hear that the amount of hours that doctors actually get trained for kind of the natural side and dietary, looking at that dietary supplements, vitamins, is very limited. We just want to just remind listeners that if you want to phone in and speak to Dr. Terry or you have a question, you can phone in on 046 97 1212, or we have the chat room on OYM or PIR, I should say. And if you have any questions, just drop them in there and Steve will pick them up, and then we'll throw the question over to Dr. Terry. One of the things I said to you, Dr. Terry, before we went live is that I was told, I think you confirmed it there, that MS is more susceptible, women are more susceptible to MS than men.
Yeah, about 8% of the initial diagnoses are female.
I'll tell you what, we're beginning to lose you again with this Skype. So I think what we'll do is we will actually we'll disconnect and we'll connect up again, because this is the trouble with Skype, and as owned by Microsoft. But Dr. Terry, we're just going to disconnect and call you again, okay? And then what we'll do is we'll carry on from there, because Skype is just acting up. So we'll just bear with us there for a minute. All right, take it away, Steve, there. And we'll just call Dr. Terry. You know, we are trying to get our guest. Oh, that's brilliant. That was very quick. It's brilliant. We are trying to, just saying to our listeners there, we are trying to get our guests over to a different system completely because of the way Skype is and the way Microsoft have it set up now. It's not peer-to-peer, it's centralized. But just to come back to what you said there about the diagnosis for women more than men.
Yeah, there are 80% of the MS diagnoses are women, and basically for all autoimmune conditions, there's a female preponderance. We assume that there's something about estrogen that increases the vulnerability to autoimmunity. It's not fully understood beyond that, and I'd also make the observation that people who get primary progressive MS, where there's no acute worsening or relapse, people just have the gradual decline, those are more likely to be men.
Now, obviously, I'm not a medical doctor in any shape or form, but my understanding of the autoimmune is that when a disease actually attacks itself, when the body attacks itself, is that right?
Correct. And the conventional thinking goes something like this. There was some type of infection, a viral or bacterial infection, that the body did not clear, or in the process of clearing, began to recognize some of their own internal structures as a foreign invader bacterial kind of problem. And then that triggers the autoimmunity.
Right.
From a functional medicine perspective, we look at other things that can influence the disease severity and the probability of disease. Now that'll include things like a leaky gut, food sensitivities, toxins, excessive cortisol, disruptive family social connections. And so, plus understanding the genetic vulnerability, which enzymes are less efficient at handling toxins or making immune structures or brain structures, and how you could use nutrition to bypass those inefficient enzymes.
Okay, so
the functional medicine doc looks at the diet, lifestyle, environmental factors, and thinks about how those contribute to the presence of the disease.
That's right.
The conventional medicine doc does not.
Right, we had Dr. Michael Kelly on. He's an Irish doctor over here, and he did say something I think it was quite important. He said, to try and be healthy in an environment that's unhealthy is very difficult.
It makes it very difficult. One of the things I tell my patients is that there is no drug that can create health in the absence of eating the food that will provide the vitamins, minerals, essential fats your cells need to do the biology of life.
Can you just say that again, Dr. Terry, because we've lost you again. The Skype quality is bad. If you can just repeat that again first.
Sure. There is no drug that will create health in the absence of the person eating the food that has necessary building blocks you need to conduct the biology of life properly.
Right, okay. There's no drug.
So drugs cannot create health.
No, definitely not. Well, they just suppress. Again, that you're treating the symptom, and they're just suppressing the body's natural reaction to what's going on.
Correct. I mean, the only drug that has the possibility of creating health is an antibiotic for an infection. Now, and for a short-term use might be okay. What many of my physicians forget is that for all those chronic diseases, we're using drugs to control symptoms, which is okay, but then you still should be going back to doing all the steps you can to create health.
But isn't an antibiotic destroying the body's system in curing the disease? Isn't an antibiotic? I mean, they give us an antibiotic, but apparently that's why we get kind of probiotics to actually put the good bacteria in, and what the antibiotics are doing is destroying the good bacteria. Is that correct?
Yes. So we are a supraorganism. So you might think that we're just three individuals. We're really a collection of trillions. So I have about 1 trillion body cells and about 100 trillion bacteria, yeast, parasites that are living on my skin, in my nose, mouth, gut, and bowels. And I need all of those bacteria to run all of the metabolic steps to have optimal health. And so anytime you've taken antibiotics, you have lost some of your good health-promoting bacteria, and you may have shifted the balance to more disease-promoting bacteria.
Yeah.
Plus, if you eat a diet high in sugar, high in carbs, you're promoting the sugar-loving yeast and bacteria that are often very disease-promoting.
Well, one of the things that we have talked about before on the show, and again, this might be something that you can agree with us, I don't know, but we tend to talk a lot about having a more alkaline body than an acid body, because disease normally cannot live in an oxygenated bloodstream or in an alkaline body. And so we need to make sure that what we take is making sure that, again, it goes back to diet and making sure that we have more alkaline, because some of these diseases can live up to a pH of 11, I believe. But our body, I don't know what the standard is now, I think it's 5.5, I think, is what doctors say is average. I don't know. But definitely having more alkaline body than an acid body.
So I completely agree that in the diet will have a huge impact on your acidity. The biggest driver for that acidity is going to be sugar, white flours, very nutrient-poor foods, having green, more vegetables, and a lower carbohydrate diet.
Sorry, Dr. Terry, can you just say that again? Could you get closer to the microphone? Because I have a funny feeling that the Skype auto volume thing is probably causing the problem as well. So if you could get closer to the mic and just repeat that for us, that'd be great.
About a half an inch from my mouth.
Right, okay.
Okay, so, and would you like me to repeat that?
Yeah, if you can, because obviously this information is very important.
Sure. The big drivers for acidity would be a high sugar diet. A lot of white flour and sugar will certainly increase your acidity. And we have been steadily increasing the amount of white sugar, high fructose corn syrup in our diets quite dramatically. At the same time, we've increased the intake of greens and relatively non-starchy vegetables, which would help alkalinize, particularly the greens.
Right, okay. Listen, again, we're losing you here on Skype for some reason. Do you have a landline, Dr. Terry, that we can call you on? And we'll go to a musical break and call you on the landline.
A landline, yes. So it's 319-688.
Oh, it's okay. If you want to put it in there, Skype box, type it in there, and we'll go to a musical break, and then we'll call you during the musical break.
I will do that.
Okay, we're just going to go off to a musical break and call Dr. Terry on the phone, and we'll be back to you in a few minutes.
Thanks.
Join UnitedWeStrike.com radio on the second Saturday of every month for our live international radio marathon. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why.
Okay, and we're back. That was just a little bit of a sting, Fields of Gold, just to while we got Dr. Terry on the landline. So we're back anyway, Alan.
Okay, right. Just a reminder for our listeners that the United We Strike Marathon will be on next Saturday. So don't forget, we'll be doing the producing, and we'll be on at 7 o'clock as usual. I think we'll have a show there. But we have Dr. Terry back. Dr. Terry, thank you for being patient, but the technology seems to be, as I just said to you there, for some reason when we have a guest on who has really solid gold information and we want our listeners to hear it, Skype tends to act up for some reason, very strange. But thank you for hanging on, and if you just want to touch base on what you said there before we lost you.
Oh, sure.
Go ahead.
So the big driver for causing acid problems is sugar, white flour, high fructose corn syrup, and that has dramatically increased, causing more and more health problems. Big driver for improving alkalinity would be greens and some sea salt, of course, and the non-starchy vegetables, berries. And that's why nutrient density matters so very much, because it can really improve the pH or the alkalinity of your system.
Okay, so when you were looking at the dietary things that you needed to deal with your MS, what did you start to take? Give us an idea of what your diet was.
So let me sort of go back in time. I had spent about 20 years as a vegetarian. Then in 2002, I had my MS. My doc in Cleveland Clinic suggested I check out Ashton Embry's work, and that introduced me to Lauren Cordain and the paleo diet. So I had some very deep thinking to do, and decided to reintroduce meat into my diet, and took out dairy, legumes, and grain. When I hit the wheelchair, I started doing my own reading and found studies that in mice, where the brains had been protected using B vitamins, coenzyme Q, fish oil, I added those to my regimen, and it seemed to slow down my decline. I kept reading, adding a few more supplements. Then when I discovered functional medicine, my supplement list had grown to 19 things. And then, as I said, the really brilliant idea was to get these things not from the pill form, but to get them in food. And the reason why I think that's so helpful is that when something is made synthetically, it may not have quite the same shape as the vitamin or supplement will have when you get it naturally occurring in food. Plus, once in food, it has related compounds that are all biologically active that are helpful to how our cells do the work of life. And furthermore, when we take supplements, it won't have the same effect as food because for many of our vitamins, the essential fats, the minerals, it's the ratio of vitamins to one another, minerals to one another, fats to one another that will determine the biologic effectiveness. So if you take, for example, if you take too much zinc, you can create a deficiency in copper or iron. If you have a high dose of vitamin A, you can create deficiencies in your other fat-soluble vitamins. If you have too much omega-6 fat, which, by the way, most people do, that can create problems in your cell membranes and how you're making neurotransmitters in the brain. So supplementation is tricky. Food is much better because you're less likely to get into the problems of ratios.
Okay, and obviously we've heard that MS sufferers tend to use cannabis, smoke cannabis, and it helps to ease their pain and discomfort. And obviously what's coming out now, well, they've probably known it for years, and we've had Ricky Simpson on. It's the THC in the cannabis that seems to be very beneficial for a lot of things and cancers. And we had people like Ricky Simpson on the show who gives this out. He makes cannabis oil, and he gives it to cancer patients, and he's had some brilliant success. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of people being cured of cancer with this cannabis oil. And I know there's a few states in America that have actually started to legalize cannabis. And globally, it's beginning, some governments are beginning to open up to the fact, that, well, actually it's a plant. This should not be criminalized. This should be legal. And for, especially people, let them grow six plants for their own, for themselves in their own garden. It's not doing any harm. And I kind of agree with that. I'm more so really for the medical side. I'm not really interested in the smoking side, but definitely for the medical side and the benefits of cannabis. Time and time again, we've heard about this. And I know in the UK they're doing trials with cannabis spray, but they're taking the high out of the spray. But it's definitely for MS sufferers who are suffering to alleviate the actual pain, and which is great. But I think your method of healing MS is going to be more beneficial to the patients.
Right. You want to get down to the root cause of what's causing the progressive deterioration. That's called the degeneration, and what's causing the inappropriate inflammation. And so, again, diet and lifestyle are critical for that. And the conventional approach focuses on taking immune suppression drugs. And for the vast majority of physicians, there's no conversation about diet and lifestyle issues. Now, I will say that because of the popularity of my TEDx talk, Minding Your Mitochondria, which I think it has about 1.7 million views now, I'm sure many, many neurologists, and probably many physicians overall, have had patients come in saying, well, what about diet and lifestyle? What about, eating this nutrient-dense diet?
I'm just thinking back in the times I've gone down to my GP for the odd query I have on something. I did say we had a doctor on. Who was the last doctor that we had on? Do you remember? We had a doctor on anyway, and she said...
Dr. Carley, was it?
Dr. Carley, that's right. And she gave out to me and she said, why are you going to your GP? They know nothing. And I just said, well, I'm just getting their opinion. It doesn't mean I have to take it, but I'm just getting his opinion. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember him ever saying, what's your diet and lifestyle? Ever. It doesn't ring a bell to me. It's kind of, okay, I'm going to check it out. Da-da-da-da. Here's a prescription. Go to the chemist. And, and I hate... And in the majority, 99.9% of cases, I don't take drugs or tablets. I just avoid them like the plague because I just don't. I know that they're wrong. I know they're just, treating the symptom,
Fortunately, there are physicians now in growing numbers that are more interested in this functional medicine approach that really does focus on diet and lifestyle. Many conventional docs do not. And I think it will be the public who's going to be ahead of the physicians getting interested in diet and lifestyle, and the physicians hopefully will come along.
I hope so. Definitely, I hope so. I mean, what would you say now, if I brought this podcast after the show down to my GP and I said, I want you to listen to this. This is Dr. Terry talking about how she cured her MS and what GPs in general should be doing today with functional medicine. What would you say to them?
Well, a couple of things. First, I'm going to pull you back a little bit from the statement that I've cured my MS. I'm dramatically better. I can walk a mile pretty easily. I can bike 20 miles without too much problem. But I'm still not quite normal. I'm not athletic yet, like I'd like to be. And I have to follow my diet and lifestyle interventions very closely. If I go out and fall for my diet, I'll precipitate a severe round of MS-related pain. So I pay very close attention to my diet and lifestyle. I will always have to do this. I'll always have to pay attention to my diet and lifestyle if I want to have my full health and vitality. So in that sense, it's not cured where I could go back to my old way of eating and think everything's going to be fine.
No, I totally agree. But your quality of life is vastly improved, and Dr. Lorraine...
Vastly improved.
Yeah,
Vastly improved, as long as I continue my diet and lifestyle interventions. And I stress that in my clinical practice, in our clinical trials, that this is not a diet. This is a new way of leading your life for the rest of your life that will give you more health and vitality.
But I totally agree. I mean, Dr. Lorraine, they said the same thing, and Bernard Bowen, these are people who are big into nutrition, and they said, look, there's no point people changing their lifestyle, curing what they have, and then going back to the old way, because what will happen is it's just going to come back.
Exactly.
They have to change. This is a whole lifestyle change with everything, not just the cure the disease that you have or wherever you have, and then go back to your old lifestyle. This is a change for life.
Correct. Absolutely. And I stress that in our clinics. I stress that in our clinical trial that the benefits will last as long as you continue the diet and lifestyle. If you stop the diet and lifestyle changes, your prior problems will all come back.
Do you think, I'm going to kind of simplify it in a way. Obviously, what happens to your body is your body telling you that what you are doing is wrong. And by you changing your diet to functional medicine or changing your diet to, good vitamins and supplements, and your body then says, right, okay, now you're on the right track. Could we simplify it that easy? Is it that easy to simplify it?
I think that's fair. You want to eat a diet that gives you the building blocks you need, takes out the things that are confusing your cells, the toxins, the things that are causing food sensitivities, and take out of your life those toxic relationships, toxic social networks that are causing your stress hormones to be out of control.
Yeah.
That will address a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Now, we do have a few questions, but the one thing that you said, and I'd like to touch base with you on is that you said you are a vegetarian, but you went back to meat. Why?
Yes.
Because Steve here is a vegetarian, and I'm sure he'd be interested to find out why.
I have the question written down.
Have you got the question?
I do, yeah. Stop reading my notes, Alan.
So, in 2002, when I was introduced to Lauren Cordain's work, I read the Paleo Solution, and I was very impressed that the hunter-gatherer societies had a healthier, more nutrient-dense diet, and that I began adopting the paleo diet. Now, it was not enough to return me to good health. I continued to decline. And then I created this more nutrient-dense diet using the paleo principles. In my book, I talk more about the potential downsides of vegetarianism, particularly if it's not done properly, thinking about B vitamins, the balance of omega-6, omega-3, the risk for anti-nutrients in grain and legumes. And it depends on the person's genetic background. Do these anti-nutrients, are they more likely to trigger an autoimmune problem for you? So if in my book I talk about this, that if you're at an ideal body weight and have no health problems and you're vegetarian, then you've figured out how to do a vegetarian diet for you that's working. But if you are overweight or you have chronic mental health problems, chronic autoimmune problems, or the medical problems, you've not figured out a diet that's working for you. And I talk about how to modify that either as a vegetarian or how to reintroduce meat into your diet.
The catch-22 here, and I kind of agree with the whole. I mean, I was going to say I'm a carnivore, but I'm an omnivore. I'll eat anything. But and I don't have a problem eating meat. I like meat. The problem is, I think half the time is that with all the chemicals that are going into the soil and in the air and the pesticides and everything else, our animals are eating this and then they're digesting it and then we're eating them and we're taking on them chemicals that are in their body. That's my concern. I don't have an issue with meat, but we've poisoned the meat to a certain extent with all these chemicals and drugs that they're probably using. So the meat, to a certain extent, is poisoned, and so we're taking on that. Now, I don't know. I mean, that's just my understanding of why I don't have. As I say, I don't have a problem with meat, but modern day farming, the way things are at the moment, that could be where the problem is.
I completely agree. The quality of food is very important, and if you think about bioconcentration. So the plants get consumed by animals, and the toxins in the plants can get concentrated in the animal flesh. So you want to think about where you're getting that meat if you're eating meat, preferably organic, and preferably grass-fed or wild, if you have that capability.
Definitely.
And the vegetables that you're having, I certainly encourage people to grow more of their own. Be as organic and clean as possible, to use the environmental working group to help prioritize what needs to be organic and what you could safely not be organic if money is an issue. But growing your own food, 100 years ago was the expectation. And I think for us to reclaim our health, we have to reclaim a food supply. Yeah, to make this easier for everybody, we should be growing more of our own food.
Yes, I totally agree. And, the fact that this kind of delivery truck, turns up at the local supermarket every day, we can't keep doing that. I mean, it's just not going to be globally possible to do that because we're destroying the planet as it is and the rainforest and everything else. And there has to be a finite end to that. It can't just keep going on, and this is why we have to go back to nature and go back to growing our own. But I'm going to pass you over to Steve. Steve has a few questions that have come in, and I'm sure he'll have a few questions for you there.
Yeah, Dr. Terry, Alan already asked my question, but I'm going to just maybe expand on it a little bit. After 20 years of being vegetarian, was it difficult to introduce meat back into your diet?
Yes. It was a big decision. I did a lot of meditating and praying over it. Then I decided that it was one thing I could do under my control. And so I began adding meat to soups and stews and gradually increased my meat consumption. But I began with broth. And I did this over a couple of months because at first I had to think pretty deeply about my decision to go back to eating meat.
And after say, going back onto reintroducing the meat into your diet, at any point would you consider maybe going vegetarian again?
No.
No.
No, I think, and I talk about this in my book, that for me, being a vegetarian was part of why I became ill. And I think for some, it's certainly possible, and I give people some guidance on how to do a vegetarian diet to decrease the risk of an autoimmune problem, but in the genetically susceptible person, vegetarian diets will increase that risk.
Okay, I'm sad to hear that.
Because I do talk about how, and Steve, I want to reassure you and the audience that if you're a vegetarian, you're at an ideal body weight, you have great health, there's no need to make a change. Continue your vegetarian diet and enjoy that. But if you're not at ideal body weight and you're not enjoying good health, I encourage you to pick up my book and get some pointers on how to restructure your diet to hopefully reduce the risk of the autoimmunity problems, health problems. And if that's not enough, then we'll talk about some other things you can do to further improve your health.
Well, I can safely say I am going to, after the show, when I go home, I'm going to log on, because I know we're going to get your details at the end. I am going to log on and I am going to buy a copy of that book, because I've been vegetarian for 25 years, and I have noticed. I know people say when you turn 40 that health issues going to start to arise, and it was only kind of when I hit 40 years of age. I'm 45 years of age now.
Yeah.
That I kind of noticed that it was aches and pains and creaks, and aches and pains that would go away, and some aches and pains that don't go away. Like I've a shoulder issue.
Yeah.
It's been there for a while, so I'm definitely going to get a copy of that book anyway.
So things that I worry about for the vegetarians, B vitamin status is one. The higher carb intake that vegetarians have increases the risk of sugar-loving bacteria being out of proportion.
We have a caller coming in. We'll just take in the call. I'm sure they have a question. Let's just bring them in.
Sure.
Hi, caller. You're on the air, OYM Radio. Do you have a question for Dr. Terry?
Hello. Yes, I would like to ask did you ever try the MMS, because it's supposed to be good also for multiple sclerosis?
We'll pass it over. Thanks for your call.
What is MMS? That's the initials. I need to know the actual term.
Right.
Pardon?
It's okay. What we'll do is we'll touch base with Dr. Terry. Thanks for your call, and we'll ask you that question.
Is there anybody in Northern Ireland that you know who is like one of these reverends with the MMS?
We will. Can you send us an email, and we'll try and sort that out for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Send us an email to info@oymireland.com, and we'll see what we can do for you. We'll contact one of the reverends down here and see if he has a contact up there for you.
Very good.
Okay. Thanks for your call. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So in terms of the treatments that I've tried, I did the disease-modifying injections first round, those ABC drugs. Then I did the conventional Novantro and Tysabri Cellceps. And by the way, I'm on no disease-modifying drug since 2008, and I've continued to do very well. I did try low-dose naltrexone, which really did nothing for me. And and otherwise I've managed my disease by these diet and lifestyle changes that I discuss in great detail in my book, The Wahls Protocol.
Well, I think Steve will grab a copy of that. The MMS is the Miracle Mineral Solution.
Miracle Mineral Solution.
By Jim Humble. And it's, I suppose the best way to call it is Dr. Carley would say it would be a bleach. But it's a mixture of two chemicals. And Jim Humble promotes MMS, and people have had some success with it regarding malaria, cancers, and various diseases.
I'm completely unfamiliar with it.
Right. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. I mean, maybe it's something if you want to Google later, in your time. MMS. Jim Humble is the chap's name.
I've just actually popped the information in the Skype chat there, Dr. Terry. So you will have that
great.
as well.
Brilliant. Okay. So yeah, if you want to go back to what you're talking about there with the vegetarian stuff, Steve.
Okay, so things I'm concerned about, the higher carb intake can be promoting for the yeast and sugar-loving bacteria getting out of proportion, creating problems that we call dysbiosis. And then the grains and legumes can have some anti-nutrients in them that interfere with the absorption of minerals, digestion of proteins. And again, I talk more about this in the book and give people some guidance on how to decide, are they having problems with that, and then what to do about it. Now, I do think people are better off in consuming animal proteins, but I do certainly acknowledge that there are many people who are vegetarian because of their deep spiritual or religious beliefs and are not going to change that. And so in the book, I try to give people some very clear guidance on how to address the concerns I have with the vegetarian diet in a way that reduces their health risk, but still allows them to follow the vegetarian diet if they're doing that for spiritual reasons. I do make the point, though, if they're being a vegetarian for health reasons, as long as their health is excellent, that's terrific. But if they're doing it, I know too many people that are vegetarian, and they've quit eating meat, but they're still eating sugar, white flour, high fructose corn syrup, not many vegetables, and no source of protein. And those people are creating chronic health problems that will affect their brain and affects their body in very negative ways. In those people, I'm very, very concerned about.
And what about people who have a vegan diet?
Well, again, the concern I'll have for the vegans is are they having enough protein? Because you need protein to run a lot of the biology in life. And do they have exposure to these anti-nutrients? Again, it's certainly possible to do a vegan diet and have it be sufficiently nutrient dense and be ideal body weight and have terrific health. And if that's the case, that person has figured it out, and for them, it's working well. If, as a vegan, though, they don't have ideal body weight and they're not having excellent health, then I raise the question for them and give them some suggestions on how to navigate out of that health problem.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to get that book because you're worrying me now. But no, I it's not for deep spiritual beliefs. It's just a kind of an animal cruelty thing. Is when I was kind of put off meat and
and I'll tell you, when I first became vegetarian, I grew up on a farm. All of the animals were pets, whether we were going to eat them or not. And I, as a young person, decided I didn't want to eat animals because I loved animals. And so I was a vegetarian for 20 years. And it was because of my love for animals. So for me, it was a big deal when I decided that, well, I am going to go back to eating meat. And clearly, I was having some big health problems at that time.
Okay. Just a question came in earlier from John, and John was wondering, and this is a good one as well. Can you ask Dr. Terry, is distilled water good to drink? And has she heard of Andrew Norton Webber? I'm not sure who Andrew Norton Webber is now myself, but the whole water thing. I mean, in your diet now, would you distill water, reverse osmosis, or would you drink your tap water?
So water, we obviously need water to live. And what I think is troubling for many of us is what has gotten into our water. I know, at least in the United States, many of the water supplies in our cities now have detectable levels of drugs in them because the population is so reliant on medication that it's gotten into our water supplies. And most of the cities, they remove some chemicals, but they're not removing the drugs. Therefore, I've put in a reverse osmosis system to make sure that the water that I'm drinking doesn't have drugs and other pollutants in it. And I talk about that. And what you want is water that's as pure as possible, as free of toxins as possible. Because when you use a reverse osmosis system, you're taking out the minerals. You're going to have to pay a lot of attention to getting sufficient minerals in your diet.
But now, I know both Alan and I use reverse osmosis. I have heard, just in relation to John's question, that distilled is quite good as well. It's probably better than reverse osmosis. But what's your thoughts on fluoride in the water? Would you consider that to be a negative or a positive?
Fluoride is a neurotoxin, and the American dentist, I believe, would argue that it's in such low doses that it's going to be beneficial to the bones and not harmful to brain cells. My perspective is that we don't need fluoride in our water, and we're better off not having it. And instead, we should be eating what I advocate, which are green, sulfur-rich vegetables, color, grass-fed meat, wild fish, organ meat, and seaweed, and then our kids would all have strong teeth, and so would we.
Yeah, that's pretty much kind of our line of thinking as well. We're actually, there's a campaign going on over here in Ireland, and I know there's campaigns going on in the US as well and other countries to remove the fluoride because of the negative effects of it. I mean, it is a poison.
Yeah, I think in Asia, for example, India is much more concerned about fluoride. And so they go through a lot of work to remove the fluoride from the water, and they laugh at us for putting fluoride into the water.
Yeah, I mean, they say, third world countries, but I mean, if you look at Ireland, I mean, 98% of Europe is not fluoridated. Yeah, Ireland, we have had it since the early 60s, I think. And there's, as Steve said, there's a big campaign with it. The whole thing about the diet, I mean, we know about aspartame, we know about MSG, we know about, the sugar's bad in our diet, and aspartame being a substitute for that. And we try and avoid a lot of these things as much as we can, but it's getting harder and harder to keep away from them when all our kind of food that we normally buy has some kind of ingredient or drug in it or chemical in it that's bad for us,
So if you're buying processed food, things that have been added to the food to increase the palatability of the food so that you will overeat it. And there's a lot of incentive to do that in the food processing industry. If, on the other hand, you buy vegetables, berries, meat, fish, and you prepare that, and so you're doing the preparation, you aren't going to have all those additives. But as soon as you buy something that someone else has made, you just have to keep in mind that there's been an incentive in those companies to create products that cause you to overeat and overconsume.
Well, the problem is half the battle with the way Ireland is at the moment and in the US and globally. I mean, we're all suffering mass austerity, and unfortunately, when you don't have the money to buy the organic vegetables and the fish and stuff, like a lot of us, you end up going down to your Walmarts and your cheapy stores to get the cheap food because that's all you can afford. And it's a catch-22, you know, and that's really the problem, and this is what we hear time and time again.
So in my clinical practice, I see a lot of veterans who have no money. They're struggling to get by. And so I do a lot of conversations about gardening, hunting, fishing, foraging. And I think it is true. But it's also true that there is no escaping. We're going to pay with our either now for food that can restore our health, and we're going to pay in time to garden, hunt, or fish, or money to go buy these foods, or we get the cheap food and then we pay in worse health, in more doctor's visits, surgeries, earlier disability from work, earlier dementia, and nursing home care. There's no escaping this unless you die young early because of an accident.
So what you're saying is it's inevitable that if we carry on the diet that we do with processed foods, that it's inevitable that something's going to happen.
You'll be ill earlier. And the things that I see as I get people, on my diet and on my program, they come in, they're looking younger and younger and younger. But what's happening is that they're getting to their real age. We've all accommodated to this chronic disease state and being worn out and exhausted, needing lots of energy drinks and caffeine to get through the day because our cells are so starved for real nutrition that when I get people turned on to good nutrition, they're coming in, the first thing that people will report back to me is their energy's up, their mood is better, their brain fog is gone. The guys, because I see a lot of men, the guys are coming back with a big smile on their face, letting me know that their love life is a whole lot better now too. Because as their cells work better, everything in their life is going to steadily improve, whatever their underlying health problems are.
It's very hard to convince some people as well that, look, if you just change your diet, or at least try change and start, instead of taking this, take this, and just gradually wean them off certain things and say, right, cut out, even if they say into drinking Pepsi, Cola, or whatever, and say, right, cut that out completely and just have a water drink or something like that, or drink of water. Even them little things might make a difference. But it's very hard because I think we're in this kind of society where we just want the pill for everything.
I'm very pleased to say that what I'm seeing is as I teach the people I see, and I see folks in a traumatic brain injury clinic and a lifestyle clinic, as we teach them that, you and I are alive because we're chemical factories. And life exists because it's a self-correcting chemical reactions. And all disease begins with chemical reactions that are not happening quite correctly, usually because of the foods that we choose to eat. And then I go through and we have some lovely diagrams to show them the building blocks that they need for their cells to thrive. And at the end of my appointment, I ask my patients, so what do you learn? What do you want to do? I'll tell you, the vast majority have begun to see that diet and lifestyle matters, and they begin the journey towards a nutrient-dense diet.
Well, it goes back to the cliche that your body is your temple, and what you put in is what you get out. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but it's so true.
But people need to understand why, because we're all addicted to the sugar, high fructose corn syrup, and processed foods with all those excitotoxins that make the food hyperpalatable, so we'll overeat. We are addicted. I'm addicted. I'm sure you guys are addicted too. In order for us to be willing to walk away from these food addictions, we absolutely have to understand how health and disease is related to the food we eat.
Yeah.
And so I think actually that's one of the most important chapters in my book are those two chapters that detail that, so people understand that link, and then with understanding comes the insight that it's worth learning to develop a new way of eating and living.
Well, totally. Oh, it's something that we always say here in OYM, myself and Steve, knowledge gives you choice, ignorance doesn't. At least if you have the information, you can choose what you want to do with it. But if you don't know what's going on, then you just carry on.
Correct.
Right, I think we have more questions. Steve?
Yeah, a couple of comments. Crown Copyright says, your body is an engine, put the best fuel into it. I think that's a good sentiment.
Yeah.
And
you know, I tell my patients, they probably know not to pour high fructose corn syrup into the gas line of their car. That would ruin the engine. And unfortunately, what they don't understand is pouring that high fructose corn syrup ruins our mitochondrial engines as well.
Yeah, and I mean we've seen the research. I think it was last year on the HC, the high fructose corn syrup, HFCS. Yeah, I think that's the abbreviation for it. And it is bad stuff. And I know as much as possible. When we go shopping to the grocery store in our house, we generally read a lot of the labels, and because of all the information that I learned, say from people who come on like yourself, Dr. Terry, and they've educated me, and it's really kind of inspired me. So when we do go to the grocery store or the supermarket, I generally do read a lot of labels, and even my kids do as well. My children, well, the two that can read are 7 and 13, and you know, if there's anything with GM, genetically modified, or if it says non-GM, that's okay. But if they're not sure, they'll ask me, and they generally watch out, and they won't buy anything that has aspartame, high fructose corn syrup, and you know they're good in that respect. And I think it's obviously, you know, from educating the children. I mean, we can educate the adults. I think that's great, but the adults have to in turn educate the children as well. But
the problem with educating the adults, I'll just quickly jump in there, is that, and I've had it, and I don't know whether you've had it, Steve, where they look at you as if to say, oh, everything's bad for you, eggs and butter, and everything's bad for you. And technically speaking, yeah, you're right, everything is bad for you.
No, but when I say educate the children, what I mean is, like, if my children know this information, and I can see on a daily basis that they believe it, they know it's true, you know. And as I said it on the chat room there earlier, my children, they used to drink, well, they never really drink kind of the sodas, if you like, but they used to drink diluted cordials, and it's got to the stage now where, by their own choice, nothing to do with me, there's no diluted cordials in the house. They just prefer drinking the water. And I think if we can educate them, and then they go into school and they educate other children, then maybe those other children can maybe plant the seed, and then they can go home and discuss it with their parents. And if their parents are open-minded, instead of trying to, you know, target the adults, maybe it's the children, and you know, from the bottom up.
Well, we have to target the schools as well, because this happens, and I've seen it, where the schools are going on to say how green they are. Yeah. And then when it comes to a function for the kids, they're giving out crisps with MSG, and they're giving out bottles of pop with aspartame in it.
Yeah.
You know, and when you talk to them about it, they just go, oh, here we go again, here's the conspiracy theorist. And you think, hang on a minute, you know, this is science, this is not a theory, you know. But it's trying to wake up the population to, you know,
trying
to
to
let them know.
Wake up the population.
It's very, you know, it's an ongoing battle that we have at OYM, and everybody else that, you know, our listeners, I'm sure, are in the same boat. But again, we try and approach it with science. We always try and say, well, look, we're not giving you our opinion. We're giving you studied research and facts, and that's the way we try and approach it.
You know, I want to tell you guys that actually I'm feeling very optimistic because of the internet, the possibility of finding information, and the access to shows like this, to blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, books. It's possible for the public to hear stories like mine that are teaching the public directly about the power of using diet and lifestyle to create health and reduce symptoms. And because people can get information now more directly, it's not controlled by gatekeepers. Yeah. I think the more and more of the public is able to put things together and have more and more tools to create health in their lives. I don't think the government's going to be able to do this. I don't think our schools will be able to do this. I think it will be the public getting access to this information and making choices. I think the public will be ahead of the medical community. The public will be ahead of the government.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's happening now. The thing is, ignorance is now a choice because there's so much information out there, as you said, on the internet. It's people whether they choose to go and look up the information. And what tends to happen a lot of the time, unfortunately, it's we have a DJ over here, and I know I've said it before on the show, and he passed away, but he had a saying. He said that Ireland is a country full of NIMBYs, which is not in my backyard. And as long as they're not affected by anything, they're not interested. And it just seems to happen that when something personally happens to someone or a member of the family, that's when they start getting interested. Well, ideally, it should be before that. But a lot of the case, it's when something happens.
Well, there's a lot of demands in our lives, and we're all just trying to do the best that we can. There's nothing like having yourself or your family members' health issues give you a wake-up call, so you start paying more and more attention to what might the real root cause of that disease be, and what is it that you could do to stop the decline, and with good fortune, perhaps turn it around.
Well, as you said, it was a kind of blessing what happened to you with the MS because it opened up your mind. Yes. I mean, that's a positive way to look at it.
It really is one of the most profound gifts I've ever been given. And I treasure those 4 years of declining health because it taught me a lot as a physician, as a person, in terms of a lot of values clarification. But I had to have all of that happen so I could then learn about functional medicine, do my research, and discover this much more meaningful way of practicing medicine, and to discover the gift and passion I have for teaching the public. It's my mission to create this epidemic of health, and we are making tremendous success.
Do you feel that you have now, after what happened, more like a moral conscience to make a difference, to make a change?
Well, I am profoundly grateful that when I look at the course of my illness, in 3 years I went from walking, being able to jog, being the tilt recline wheelchair. I managed to slow things down a bit, but it was difficult to sit up in a regular chair. Life was very difficult. And I mean, my spouse and I talked about the prospect that I may well become bedridden. I was having more and more problems with MS pain that couldn't be controlled. And so it was grim. There were difficult. It was difficult. And now, instead, 6-7 years later, I'm walking easily. I can bike, lecture, flying around the country, around the world, giving lectures, writing books. And I'm just so grateful to have my life back that, my family supports my mission of teaching the public that they too could get their lives back. That if I could come back from as ill as I was, and if you go to my website, you can see the pictures I have of me in the wheelchair.
That's right, yeah, I've seen them, yeah.
If I can come back, they could come back too.
Of course, and there's a lot to be said about the diet and the benefits of the diet, whichever way you do it, whether it's juicing or whatever way you approach it. But I do agree that we need to go back to give our body the nutrients that it needs to fight any diseases that may happen. The only obviously thing that I said earlier on with Dr. Michael Kelly, which is he's right, is that it's very hard to keep a healthy body in a poisoned environment. And unfortunately, with everything that's around us, not just the food, but we've wireless technology and we have mobile phone masts and everything else going off around us, and it's very, very difficult to stay positive and stay away from it. But again, as you say, with the fact that we have the internet and we're educating people slowly but surely and waking them up to it, fingers crossed. I mean, I do think the pharmaceutical companies have to take some level of responsibility, and and maybe back off. But they're a business.
They won't. I mean, the companies are organized to maximize profits, and the way corporates are, that's going to happen. We're probably not going to be able to change that unless the fundamental business laws are changed. And unfortunately, I don't see that. But everybody gets to vote with how we choose to spend our economic resources. We get to vote with our euros or dollars, with our food choices. We get to vote with our time choices, and we can vote to create our epidemic of health, or we can stay in the misery of the epidemic of disease.
Well, the problem...
We do control our resources, and the way to defeat the pharmaceutical companies' dependency is by our choices.
Well, I agree with, obviously, if we make a choice to have a healthier lifestyle, we can make that choice. Regarding the government and everything else, well, then that's another argument for another day, because we have this perception that we have this vote every 5 years and we can change the government, but it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee, as you know, in the States with different Bush and Obama. It doesn't matter who the puppet is, it's the people behind pulling the strings. So what we have to do is take the responsibility onto ourselves, not onto them, and say, right, we'll make a change to our life and our lifestyle. And then,
well, really, it was never the government's responsibility for how we conduct our lives, fortunately. It's always our responsibility for how we conduct our life, what we choose to eat and do. And I want to always stay that way. But it certainly is time for us to wake up and realize that we created this epidemic of disease, and we could create an epidemic of health if we would pay attention to diet and lifestyle choices.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, we have 10 minutes left, so let's look at the positives, and we'll get all your information as well. The main thing is, the one thing that's very common in the doctors that we speak to, again, is got to do with lifestyle, it's got to do with food. And so from your part, where should people start looking? If we, like Steve is going to go off now and get your book, and we'll obviously have a read of that because there's big interest. Now, funny enough, you should say that, just going back to the vegetarian side, I was reading an article somewhere down the line, and it was written in a way that mankind, when mankind was more in tune with nature, mankind has always eaten meat, but they were more in tune with nature, and instead of going out and just killing and dragging the deer or whatever back to the cave, apparently they were so in tune with nature that nature would actually give up the animal for the man. So it could be a weak or an old deer or something that was on its way out anyway, and nature would be so in tune with man that that deer would come out and sacrifice itself, and that was the balance that we had. And there are kind of Native American tribes and obviously indigenous tribes as well that say that mankind is so far out of balance with nature that we should be trying to tune back into it. So, and I do think that maybe being a carnivore with the vitamins that we got from the meat made us different to Neanderthal man. Maybe, I mean, that's another, I don't know how proven that is. But again, it's down to people's lifestyles and what they feel and what they want to do. Each to their own, that's what I'd say. But let's talk about, if somebody says after listening to this show saying, right, I want to make a change, what would you start recommending that they do?
Well, you want to maximize the nutrient density. So my big plan is you eat more green leaves, you eat more sulfur-rich vegetables in the cabbage, onion, garlic family, some things that are colored all the way through, high-quality protein. I have a bias towards animal protein, but you need to get sufficient protein. You want to have food that's as clean and as organic as your resources will allow. And if you can, begin growing some of your own food.
Yeah, I know in the States now they try to introduce a bill to stop people doing that. I don't know whether you heard about that.
No.
Yeah, there's a couple of states that they tried to bring in a bill, and I can't give you the number offhand, but we came across it here on the radio show where they were trying to stop people growing their own food, and the excuse was that it wouldn't be if you grew your own food and you gave it to somebody and they died, they were poisoned or they were sick, then it would be in a big insurance thing and there'd be trouble. So this is the excuse they were using because they want people to rely on the nanny state, on the actual state itself, and they were trying to bring the bill in. Now, I don't know how far they've got, but we have seen a couple of stories where people have been stopped growing their own food or even stopped collecting rainwater at one point.
That's troublesome.
So that's things like that we have to be careful of because, you know, again, governments, I know you say that we can't control our lives, but we can control our lives to a certain extent. I mean, over here in Ireland, they're bringing in water meters and they're going to be charging us for water. Now, this water that we're getting is fluoridated, so we're going to be paying for poisoning ourselves. How ridiculous.
That's disappointing.
That it's not ridiculous. It's madness. And our government is saying we're going to. I mean, I don't remember. I haven't seen any paperwork where God signed over the contract to give, you know, our government the water because water is. We need that to survive. It's not a commodity, but they're treating it as such, and then we're being charged for it with the poison in it. So this is what's going on over here in Ireland. It's just kind of ridiculous. But again, as we say, we'll keep it on the positive and we'll focus on saying to people, if you can grow your own, they're not stopping us doing that just yet. So if you can grow your own veg and get out there and do that and get the seeds. I know my granny used to say, and you know, I've said it once or twice on the show, your health is your wealth.
Absolutely.
You know, if you don't have your health, you can't really do anything. I think you'll definitely vouch for, you know, that if you ended up in a wheelchair and you just, you know, you're immobilized and you can do very little. And I think when times like that, things like that happen, even when somebody hurts their wrist or hurts their leg and they're on crutches, they realise how important it is to how important they're even, you know, having the function of a leg or an arm or a wrist that's sprained or broke or fingers or something, and they only realise it then how important it is. When they miss it, they can't use it.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, well listen, what we'll do is we have a question. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions here questions and comments that I want to squeeze in, Dr. Terry. This is one from Jim. Jim mentioned earlier on the chat about a miracle drink. Now, this is not to be confused with the MMS. This is a different miracle drink that Jim has heard of. He said it's made from beetroot, carrots, and apples, and it's reported that this miracle drink can cure lung cancer, inhibit the growth of cancer cells, and strengthen the heart, the kidneys, and the liver. I'm just wondering, is that anything that you've heard of?
So, I'm approached by many people with a variety of miracle products derived from superfoods. And my response always is, there's plenty of local superfoods, and they're called vegetables and berries, grown locally, obtained fresh, and eaten. And in my plan, I want people to have a lot of these locally grown miracle foods. We don't need to be getting a miracle fruit from, you know, the Amazonian rainforest. When you juice these things, you concentrate them, you may further increase some of the nutrition, but you also concentrate the sugar, so there's some pros and cons of juicing. But the miracle foods are fruits and vegetables, berries, and I'd also say organ meats. It's a very important miracle food.
Organ meats. Okay. I did hear about that, Steve, the beetroot, the carrot, and the apple. It's some chap from either China or Japan who was saying that it's beneficial. One of them a day, he said, and it can be very beneficial. So organic, they have to be organic though. That's the only thing.
Correct. You know, in all of these, what is happening is you're increasing the nutrient density of that person's diet, and of course that will greatly improve health. If the person's eating a maximally nutrient dense diet, like the one that I described, the addition, you're not likely to get any additional benefit from these superfoods because you've already eaten a diet full of superfoods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you wouldn't notice the difference, but if you just happen to change and decided to change from Monday and start taking it, you'd probably find the difference.
So if you have a poor diet and you add these superfoods, you're going to feel like $1,000,000, like, oh my God, something marvelous is happening. But if your diet's already maximally nutrient dense, these superfoods will add very little because you've already have such a nutrient dense diet.
Yeah. And what would be I suppose the symptoms of a good diet is that you'll have more energy, you'll feel more healthier, you won't have all them quirky health problems maybe, the odd, we always say, oh, it's old age, I'm feeling it, but the chances are it's not old age, it's what you're putting in.
Correct.
There you go. Okay, Don, well, listen, we've reached that time. Dr. Terry, this has been a fantastic interview. Love the information, brilliant information. Thanks again for coming on the show. Much, much appreciated. I'm going to pass you over to Steve, and Steve's going to get all your details of your website and your book and everything else.
Oh, great.
Steve.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, Dr. Terry, I want to echo Alan's sentiments as well. It's been educational, and it's been, I've learned a lot. You frightened me halfway through, but I think I've made a full recovery, and definitely gonna snag a copy of that book. I've already just, while Alan was shooting the breeze there, I was just popped along to your website and I followed the links, and I've already got it in my shopping cart there on Amazon.
Great.
So hopefully we get that sorted out. Just for anyone who's interested in finding out more, and I know there is a lot of great information on your website there, because as I've been thumbing through it while we're live, and could you just give out your website address, maybe the name of the book, and
sure.
and your
the website is terrywahls.com. So it's TERRY Wahls WAHLS.com. The name of the book is The Wahls Protocol: How I Beat Progressive MS Using Paleo Principles and Functional Medicine. It will be released March 13th, and I expect it's going to change the lives of millions.
And Dr. Terry, will that be available on audio as well as the printed version?
So I believe the Kindle version and the Nook version have the ability to use a synthesizer voice that will read it to you, although I admit I'm not certain. I don't think they have a separate audio version. There's the electronic version and the hardback version.
Okay, and a little addition there would be great is if there was a version available where you were actually reading the book, because you're very articulate. And
that would be cool, wouldn't it?
That would be cool, actually.
Well, we found, just to jumping in there, the reason why Steve says that as well, we found that more women read than more men. It seems to be that men aren't really interested in reading, and you get more women reading. So with the audio book, it kind of solves that problem as well,
Well, I agree. However, that's a decision that Penguin, the publisher, will have to make.
No worries. But Steve, one more.
I just want to mention as well that I did pop a link into the chat box earlier from, I think it's 2011, Dr. Terry, of a talk you've done on TED. TED do great talks, and that is available online. I've popped it in, so maybe people can check that out as well.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you. It's a strange question, but it just came into my head, and I said, you know what, I'll just ask. Again, it is a strange question, but with all the good work that you're doing, you're educating people, and you're helping people. At the end of your days, what would you like to read in your own obituary column?
That she created an epidemic of health.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Good one. I like that. Yeah. Excellent. All right, Dr. Terry, stay with us there for a minute. We're just going to go over to a musical break, and we'll be back after this.
Join UnitedWeStrike.com radio on the second Saturday of every month for our live international radio marathon. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why.
Okay, it's Alan's party and he'd cry if he wants to.
I like the way you blame me for that. Alan asked me to play that song again. No, I didn't. Okay, Right. Just a couple of things. We said before at the start of the show that we have a few things to talk about, but we didn't want to kind of hold Dr. Terry up, so we said we'd mention it at the end of the show. So just a couple of things that you need to be aware of. Again, take this with a pinch of salt. I'm not saying it's going to happen or anything like that. It's just purely information, okay? And again, it depends on your thoughts. Now, I'm going to read out something that was on Benjamin Fulford's website, but Patrick Henningsway, I think his name's Henningsway, who has a website called 24th Century Wire, also agrees with what Benjamin Fulford is saying. And he says here, if the US government goes bankrupt this week, as predicted by US Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew, and next week on March the 4th, that's this Tuesday, as predicted by Grady Means, former assistant to Nelson Rockefeller. Basically what they're saying is that if this does happen, we can expect all banks and ATMs as well as the internet and all credit cards to be shut down for a period of several days until the fraud can be cleaned out and new system put online. During that time, emergency broadcast networks will be used to fill in the brainwashed sheeple of what has really been happening over the last 100 years since a small group of gangsters took over the process of creating and distributing money in the US. This may not come to pass, though, because the cabal has proven itself to be extremely difficult to dislodge. At their recent G20 meeting held in Australia and at other meetings they have held, they talk about confiscating money from private bank accounts in order to keep themselves going. Neil Keenan, for his part, believes the cabal will crash the system just to scare people into obedience and thus strengthen their control. If they try such a thing, it is a pretty sure bet there will be a lot of chaos and a lot of nasty things happening before the dust finally settles into cabal defeat. Now, the other thing as well that was on the 24th Century Wire, and Patrick Henningsway, I think it's Henningsway, that's how you pronounce his name, mentioned that as well, and he said it's not a case of if, it's a case of when. So even if it doesn't happen on Tuesday, apparently it's going to happen sometime. So just be aware of that and keep an eye on things with the banks. We know in the last few weeks we've had banks having problems giving out money. They won't give out the money, or the ATMs are, not giving out money, or the banks have shut down, or they're, there's been loads of issues with the banking system, okay? So just keep an eye on things. And the other thing I have here is we have 4 blood moons starting April 15th. Now, a blood moon is a full lunar eclipse which coincides with Jewish high holy days. They've coincided with major historical events like the Six-Day War in 1967. Now, the 4 blood moons are April 15, 2014, October 8, 2014, April 4th, 2015, and September 28, 2015. Now, please bear in mind with all these predictions, some of them are done on purpose to desensitize us all when the real event is coming. We won't pay attention as we see it as another hoax. They try and desensitize us with all this information. All these dates are banded around and nothing happens, and we go, oh, there we go, doom and gloom, the world is nigh, la-di-da-di-da. But maybe, obviously, they're trying to desensitize us, so when something does, or is planned to happen, or something's going to happen, everything's kept quiet and we don't hear anything about it. So, just keeping your ear to the ground of what's going on, really. That's the main thing. Now, there is talk about, I was reading, I've seen Reverend Michelle Hopkins' YouTube channel, and she had an article up there with a guy who read a letter saying that there's talk about FEMA Region 3, that the nukes were moved from Texas, troops have been trained before a specific date, schools preparing 3-day kits for all the students, FEMA coffins shipped to Hawaii and the East Coast. The U.S. Geological Survey Department is surprising information allegedly controlled by Washington about the volcano in Yellowstone Park. They cannot confirm this. It is just information that they came across. So they're talking about Yellowstone Park, but they're saying that with FEMA Region 3 and the nukes and the troops being trained and the student kits, there's no smoke without fire. Now, they thought that it was going to go with the passing of Ison, hence the rush on getting things ready. The New Madrid is also waking up, and this is due to an increase in solar activity that is affecting all the fault lines in the world. Now, I'm sure you all know about the global noises and booms and bangs being heard globally, and also the sinkholes appearing everywhere, and the global weather patterns being very bad. So, there is something brewing. There's something going on with the weather conditions, sinkholes, and everything else. As to what's going on and when it's going to happen, I don't know. I've no answers. I will be watching what's going on. I'm sure Steve will be as well. But just to bear in mind that, there seems to be a lot going on at this time. Steve?
There is a lot going on, but I'm not going to be keeping my ear to the ground, because you look kind of silly with your ear to the ground, wouldn't you? Although people would know what you're doing straight away. Be like one of those things on catchphrase, say what you see, ear to the ground. I mean, yeah, there's a lot going on, and we said it before, and we'll say it again, dates, you can't rely on dates, because there's, as someone said before, and I can't remember who it was, it's more about windows of opportunity than actual dates of when stuff's going to happen. But I mean, Blood Moon, I can't recall ever seeing one of those before, so it's going to be interesting if it does happen. I've never actually seen one.
No. Well, the other thing that has coming out during the week as well, and I just touched base on it, is got to do with Ed Snowden. And Ed Snowden's latest leaked documents open lid on what is perhaps the most vindictive and disgusting aspect of the government's corporate joint surveillance state seen yet. This is Britain's GCHQ guide to online covert action, which is shared with US agencies like NASA. Now, we talk about shills and plants and agent provocateurs out there who try and infiltrate groups and the alternative media movement to try and break them up. And this is what Ed Snowden's talking about. He said, according to these latest documents, there are paid government agent contractor persons on social media posing as someone they are not, whilst on the payroll of the government. Their job is to befriend members of the alternative media, embed themselves in the ebb and flow of day-to-day communication, and then to engage in elaborate subterfuge by any means necessary. The training exercise below uses terms like befriend, infiltrate, mask, mimic, rouge, set up, disrupt, create cognitive stress, use deception, ruin business relationships, and post negative information on appropriate forums, all of which is not only illegal and morally bankrupt, but also runs completely contrary to the very fundamental values and indeed founding principles of a modern, free, democratic society, a constant constitutional republic. Government targets in this malicious operation appear to be bloggers, activists, journalists, social event organisers, and anyone else deemed to be an emerging leader or voice in the public sphere or alternative media online. So there you go, guys. That's a list of what they're teaching these agent provocateurs to do. So just be on your guard. I know there's a lot of good people out there in the alternative media doing a lot of good work, but as usual, only takes one bad apple to spoil a barrel full of apples. So just be on your guard, and if you're with a group of people or you're involved in a group of people and anyone is in any negative way pulling the energy down in the group, just beware of that. And there's no point saying, oh, well, that's just the way that person is. That's unacceptable. If that's the way they are, that's fine. But they shouldn't be bringing that into the group. They should keep it at home and put it in a box and leave it there, I think, in most cases. So just be on your guard, everybody who's involved, because we are at a time now that, we are on the seesaw, and I reckon we're kind of in the middle of the seesaw, and it just depends. We just need to keep on pushing to get the other end of the seesaw down so we can start going downhill. And I think we just have to, keep going as best we can.
Well, I'd rather be on the swings, actually.
Yeah, swings and roundabouts.
It is all swings and roundabouts, and seesaws.
How do we do with the chemtrails? Anybody reporting about seeing chemtrails where they are, Steve?
A couple of people mentioned earlier, after you asked the question, that there had been a lack of noted chemtrails. Got most of the comments actually from the peoplesinternetradio.com, so thanks to everybody over there. They had some information that lack of chemtrails in Ireland and also over in Scotland as well. It had been noted that they they hadn't been there. So yeah, I wonder will it continue though, or will tomorrow morning will it be kind of business as usual? Maybe it was just a case of they ran out with the chemical. Maybe they're waiting on a new batch to come in or something. Well, or maybe they're adding something else to it, something even more poisonous and more deadly.
Well, we're going to get David Hugo Boyle on in a few weeks' time, and David did happen to say in passing, I've heard it through one of our listeners, Patrick, that that's part of the good guys doing what they're doing. So, let's just keep an eye out of the weather. If people want to email us on OYM, it's info@oymIreland.com or info@oymradio.com, and just keep us posted on chemtrails and let us know if you're seeing any in the next few days. Hopefully, if the weather's good enough and we can get a blue sky, we'll be able to see them. That would be quite good. But next week, let me see what we're doing next week. I don't know. I think we have Tony Z on with another couple of people, because the week after that, what we have is the actual event that's happening in the UK. So I think that's the week before. So Tony wants to get a couple of more people on and talk about it. How was your week anyway? I didn't ask you.
No, I just thought you didn't care anymore.
I love you really.
Yeah. How was my week? Not much to report. I mean, we've got 5 minutes to go. Not really much to report. Just the same as yourself, doing a bit of research, watching a few YouTube videos, of what people are saying and what's kind of moving and shaking. I did see a video actually on Facebook. A guy put up. He's I can't think of the chap's name, but he put up a video of Building 7 on the World Trade Center from 9/11, and he done a little bit of photoshopping, not even Photoshop, the After Effects, Adobe After Effects he used on it, and he said, look at this, here's a proof that Building 7, you can see the explosions going off just before it came down, and he done that with Adobe After Effects. He didn't say what he used, and he uploaded the video, and he asked people, all the truthers out there, share this video, download it and upload it to your own channel. And he said thousands of people did. And then after he got the response, he came out then with a second video to say, yeah, listen, I know you truthers, you believe what you're doing, but don't just take someone's word for it and start reposting videos. He said, do your homework first. And he said, I made the video. I made it with Adobe After Effects. He said, if you actually look, when the film's playing, look at the side of the screen, turn your head sideways. He said, I actually on the windows of the building, I superimposed the letters there. This is fake, or whatever he had, And so yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. And as Alan's always says before, use a little bit of discernment to whatever you see, and don't just kind of accept everything you see as verbatim. And it's not gospel. It's not set in stone. So it is always wise to. I'm kind of preaching to the converted here, really. But, do your own little bit of research. And on that, just wanted to mention as well, anyone who was early into the bar this evening or into the chat room would have noticed I did put a link up the top to something that came across my path this morning. It was a book, it was a video supposedly of a book called The Jewish Protocols of Zion. And I just started listening. It's a 3-hour YouTube presentation, and I started listening to it and listen to what the guy was saying. It's all doom and gloom according to this chap anyway, and how these protocols are used to enslave us basically, and they kind of they talk about how to do it. Now what I did was, and I said to Alan earlier, while I was listening to this, I looked up the Jewish Protocols of Zion based on the picture that this chap had up on the YouTube channel, and I got a PDF copy of the book, which I think I also linked above in the chat room. And the book, he talks about 24 protocols. There are 24 protocols in the book, but as he's reading them, they're not corresponding to what's in the book. So I'm guessing he just he went through it and put it into layman's terms. I'm not 100% sure, but again, that's up there if anyone's interested. It came across my path, and I don't know why it did, but I feel that it's obviously came across my path for a reason. So I'm about an hour and a half into the thing, and I'll listen to the rest. It won't be tonight now. It'll probably be tomorrow at some stage. But I did say to Alan when I came up, and I think I sent him the link as well. But you've heard of that, haven't you?
I have, and can I just quickly say we have JP on next week. Sorry, not Tony Z. JP. We're going to be talking about all the energy changes on the planet and what's going on. So just keep that in mind. Sorry about that. Tony Z will be coming on in another few weeks' time. But JP from Wolf Spirit Radio and Ever Beyond's going to be on, and we're going to be talking to him about energy changes because there's a lot going on at the moment. So, Steve, yeah, I did see that book, the protocols of the protocols of Zion, the Elders of Zion. I have heard about it. I haven't read it, but I've heard about it. All right. Okay, we've come to that time. It's a minute to go. So, People's Internet Radio coming up next. I'm not too sure who's on, but I'm sure it'll be a very good show. So, take care, everyone. Have a safe week. If you have any information, let us know. Any news, anything like that. If anything happens, just keep us posted. For myself, Alan James, take it easy, and we'll catch you again. Bye-bye.
And for myself, Stephen George, have a very, very good week, and we'll do it all again next week. Thanks to everyone who participated on the chat, and also from the chap who rang in there earlier. So, for myself, good night. See you next week.